And can we please give a big hand to Mr. Robert Klein and Mr. Marshall Fine. Bravo! Oh boy, and we haven't gotten started yet. Unbelievable. Okay, I'm going to talk for a few minutes. Actually, I'm going to ask questions up here for a few minutes, and then we're going to open up to you folks. Watching this, and I don't know which of you to ask, but this felt very much like a collaboration. I don't know, how long have you guys known each other? Did you just get to meet to do this, or had you known each other before?
I met Robert in 1999. I was in my previous life as a newspaper reporter. Did a long piece about his creation of one of his HBO specials. Basically spent a year following him. We got to be friends and stayed friends and kept having lunch on a regular basis. And I've had this idea sort of since then, but it's only in the last 3 or 4 years that I was able to figure out how to do it.
Was it a hard sell? How did you feel about this, Robert? Did you want this done?
I was against it completely. Why would anyone want something that praises you to the sky, shows your best work, and your life as an old Jew in Briarcliff shopping? It was irresistible. Actually, he had this idea a long time. But he went ass backwards on it in an interesting way. All these wonderful comedians, and there are more than are in the movie, have often said I was their influence. I think Jay Leno summed it up. When you're a kid in rural Massachusetts, you're into comedy, and people come up to your mother and say, is he still involved? Does he want to be a comedian? You know, and you could point to Robert Klein. He went to college, he was normal, you know, a comedian. But we made what they call a sizzle reel. It was about 5 minutes long of some good work of mine, some of the supermarket, whatever. And he was at the Dubai Film Festival, and some of Weinstein's, Weinstein and some of his, Weinstein himself had a session as a male model. He was doing a Calvin Klein underwear ad. They saw the thing, they went crazy. They loved it. And this guy is like the luckiest guy. They financed it like with the snap of the fingers. They loved it. And we saw it in Texas at the South by Southwest Festival, at the Tribeca Festival. And I think it's a sweet movie. It's very difficult for me to be objective because I've watched myself in one for 45 years or so, be a comedian working singly, but this is beyond the pale, all these people saying these things. His idea was to get all these guys saying these things, and I was terrified. You know, I mean, I know all these guys, but we're not intimates. Is Leno or Jon Stewart going to, oh yeah. And they all said these things, and they were really heartfelt, which touched me. And I said, you better get my best work to match it. And so we scoured. The only limitations on this, which are frustrating, and you'll never know because you haven't seen it, were it was difficult to get clearances. I had a bit about how I discovered my father discovered me watching Little Richard. In the Tutti Frutti, hallelujah, my father. What the hell is this? The world is coming to an end. What is this Tutti Frutti? A code word with you kids? What is this? Yes, we're going to kill you in your sleep, Pop. It's a thing. Then later on, my kid is 12 years old. I come into his room. I watch. He's watching the Red Hot Chili Peppers. What I got, you gotta give it to your mother. What I got, you gotta take it, stick it in you. And I didn't want to be unhip. I said, can we talk? You know. And we couldn't get the clearance to use what I got. You got to give it to your mother. How about $20,000? So I say to them, up yours. So what I mean is, there were things that were obstacles, but by and large, I thought it was, and there's a guy named Brennan Vance who did all the camera work, his associate, and I was thrilled. And as far as the collaboration, I did have a say in what material we might use if it were available. A lot of times NBC said that's enough of using our stuff or whatever else. But it's really Marshall's film. And that was also a relief, you know, to kind of let it go. And that's it. Let's go.
So Marshall, was it you know, you have some of the great comics speaking in this film. Was it an open door? Was it easy to get to them, to Jay Leno and Jerry Seinfeld? Was it like, oh, of course we want to talk about this amazing man?
It's, as I said to you earlier, I was constantly surprised and pleased at the huge reservoir of goodwill that Robert has in that community. I mean, Jerry Seinfeld was the first person we went to because I had seen him on several different comedy specials saying repeatedly that he wouldn't have gone into comedy if it hadn't been for Robert, that Robert was the biggest influence on his career. And so I thought, if I can get Jerry Seinfeld to say yes, I can probably get the rest of these guys. And they all, you know, and they all were very cooperative and really easy to work with, and had nothing but nice things to say.
Great. Yeah, one of the things that struck me, because I was watching you back in the day on Saturday Night Live, and I remember I Can't Stop My Leg, but I'd forgotten how much music and musicality was tied into your performances. Was there ever a time when you thought you would become just a musician rather than a comedian?
No, I could sing before I could talk. They said at 6 months old I could carry a tune. And I just always made music a part of my comedy, starting with Child of the 50s, which is a doo-wop group in which I played all 5 vocal parts. Mm-hmm. I recorded over the ultimate ego trip, right? You know, I've been in a few Broadway musicals. And I always thought music should be part of it. But as I told those kids, it seemed a little arrogant to pick up the harmonica and say, this is the way it should be done. That kid was wretched on the keyboard.
Oh, yeah, he was bad.
Yeah, you think about the old people. It's like, you know, when Sarah Silverman, you're going to die soon. She went to an old age home. I mean, I'm sensitive to that. I'm 86 years old. Music has always been an integral part of what I do. And there was no template when I started. Now there are hundreds of comedy clubs and places to learn stand-up and to get into. In fact, my son, belatedly, at 31 years old last year, decided to go into stand-up. I wish he had done it earlier, but he's doing all right. He worked for a nonprofit for Bobby Kennedy's Waterkeeper for years, and he decided to go into comedy. And he's playing all these little clubs, some of them at the very low. You pay $5 and you get a chance to go in front of the mic. When I started, there was no such thing as a comedy community or the comedy industry, but now it's huge. And I just think, again, that I think that making people laugh, there's no proof it cures anything. Who was the great editor who said he cured himself by comedy? You remember?
Norman Cousins.
Norman Cousins.
He's dead now, though.
Well, comedy killed him, that's true. No, he had a fatal arthritis, and he just showed himself Marx Brothers films and whatever. And, you know, it doesn't cure anything, but it sure makes you feel better. And I don't know, standing up there and watching people laugh is just priceless. And especially when you do it on some decent terms. You don't have, you know, I never took my pants down and showed my buttocks to the audience. I don't go for the cheapie. Thank goodness is right. How would you know? I mean, you know, what I wanted to do, I think Jonathan Winters and Lenny Bruce were my biggest influences, or inspirations, I should say, because I loved all the comedians. To make it something beyond just a silly joke, to say something, to make a point. And I think maybe that's a trend. I don't know.
Do you follow comedy today? Do you have feelings about Louis C.K., those types of things?
I like Louis. I like, Louis Black. Too much profanity for me.
Yeah.
Lenny Bruce, whose demise was almost Christ-like. I mean, he couldn't work. No one would hire him. I should have mentioned Marty Garbus was his lawyer, who I saw not long ago.
I know him.
Marty is the top First Amendment guy. He was a champion, but I mean, it was pathetic. When you listen to his stuff now, it's so intelligent and non-offensive, at least for the most part. I think, anything goes, any bodily function. There's no elegance and eloquence. I mean, raise it up a little. That's my only complaint. Are there funny people? Yes. Comedy will go on and people will laugh through good times and bad times. I just don't like some of the crudeness of it, that's all.
Yeah. Did you give your son some advice when he came to you and said you were going to...
He keeps me at arm's distance in an amazing way. I didn't tell people I was his father, but I give him advice. I give him plenty of advice. I think I can be helpful to him, but I think he's enormously talented. I'd love him to be a superstar, far surpass anything I did. He's a tall, handsome dude with talent, and let him go at it. I love him. I mean, he's the only thing I got. The only lie in the thing, when my ex-wife and I, some of people have indicated they know Brenda here from yoga. I wish she had done the leg around the neck move in the yoga. She was a great singer. She sang at the Met. I wore a rug in the last row of the Metropolitan Opera while she was on, doing the Rosenkavalier and Hansel and Gretel. The spouses of opera singers all have ulcers. We weren't fighting over the house. The house was a big Stamford White house on Sleepy Hollow Road. It was impossible for us to keep it afterwards. That was a People magazine bullshit thing. We tried to keep it very private. I'm very grateful that I wasn't really in the supermarket tabloids much at that time, but it was the worst time of my life, I gotta say.
Are you still, obviously you guys share a son, so are you in contact?
We don't share him, he's mine. This wasn't some Solomonic thing where she gets an arm and I get a leg. And
I fed you a great line there.
it's the dog eating festival in China. Did you see that today in the Times? He loves his mother. That's cool. I mean, we don't have much to do with each other, but he and I are extremely close. He lives mostly in Brooklyn. He's up in the house in Briarcliff all the time. He has a fiancée for the last 11 years. He's glacial in his matrimonial desires. I don't know what it is. But that was a glorious thing of my life. I always wanted to be a father. Probably would have had 3 kids or so if the marriage had worked out. But he was worth it by himself. And believe me, my hands were full just raising him. I can't imagine people that go to the zoo, to the gorilla complex with 5 children. This is another advertisement for birth control, the gorilla death. Remember the guy used to be on the Tonight Show every week? We're having too many children. We've got, now nobody dares mention it. They don't want you to have an abortion, but when the kid is born, you're on your own, baby.
Now, I wanted to, speaking of family, your dad, very interesting portrayal of your father, who I guess had a lot of humor. And how did he feel about, well, we heard a little bit about the idea of you becoming a comedian. He was not for that at first.
Not for that. My sister said, I'm going to hang those professors. Right.
But how did he come around? How did that work?
Oh, my God. They both, I mean, they moved to South Florida, which is unusual, I know. And they were 65. And I have a beef with South Florida, as you know. They were dead 35 years later. He was terrified. I mean, he was just, when I used to tell him what my courses were at undergraduate school, well, American diplomatic history, inorganic chemistry, local government, are these things you could get for a profession? Is it directed towards a profession? you know? I said, well, I'm taking shoemaking, 404, and tailoring, learning how to be a tailor, you know, just. They had the greatest. They sat next to President Carter on the White House lawn and the Supreme Court at our table. And when Lucy and I and Marvin Hamlish went to the White House to perform, he was on the set with Barbra Streisand and the Owl and the Pussycat. And my parents had a wonderful, wonderful time based on my celebrity. So, you know, eventually, you know, it paid off. My father said, don't be the fool, you know, whap, whap, whap. No, he was wrong. He could have been a professional comedian, but it wouldn't even remotely have occurred to him.
Yeah.
You know, as a kid, brought up in Yorkville, my ancestors came over on the Mayflower. They had the buckled shoe concession on board. The pilgrims are crazy about these buckles, the belts, the hat, the schmeckle. They had buckles everywhere. And my ancestors made a fortune. They actually came from Hungary in 1903, quite fortunately. Jewish boys born in 1942 in Hungary did not fare well. And I spoke before the Hungarian American Society at Princeton for my friend Robert Halmy, a wonderful producer. And I said, what an honor it is to be speaking before an organization representing a country from which my grandparents fled in terror in 1903, you anti-Semitic bastard. The cops grabbed me in my face like at a Trump rally. I mean, out in 1 second. There were some scratches, but no civil suit. I mean, they just... And I let them have it, these bastards, for chasing my ancestors.
Well, I'm going
Marshall,
to...
too much talking.
No. Now, you know, I want to hear, we want to hear more from Marshall as well, but I just want to say Marshall Fine is an excellent critic. I've been reading him for a long time, but to think that he goes out and makes a great movie as well, you got to really hand it to him. And I was crying last night when I was watching it. I can't stop my leg. I got to tell you, I saw it all those years ago, and then I watched the movie last night all day today in my head. I can't stop my leg. That's all I could think about. It's unbelievable. It's one of those things that just...
I want to announce just a moment the presence of a wonderful woman who I consider part of my family, Melanie Roy Friedman, the daughter of Rodney Dangerfield, is here. Stand up, Melanie. She was so eloquent in the film. Come on. And her husband, Dr. Friedman, and her 2 sons, who have been let out of prison temporarily just for this. Rodney was a genius. Maybe he wasn't the greatest family guy in certain ways, but she's a gem, and he got to get some credit for it. I learned a lot from him, you know. We're so different, you'd never know it. But at Yale Drama School, they didn't have stand-up comedy, you know. Dean Brustein, after I was there, Brustein wasn't my dean, but Brustein asked me if I wanted a fellowship to teach stand-up, to work with stand-up. I was hot. I didn't want to go up to New Haven twice a week for $9,000 for 8 months. So I never did. But I think now, even in colleges, we saw that's a club. And the kid who I think was funniest is Marshall's son, who said, I've been an altar boy all these years. I've been an Eagle Scout. I was never abused. I don't understand. He's a terrific kid, and he's thinking of doing it himself, and I think he's terrific at it. Anyway, the whole experience was wonderful. They followed, this thing took, what, 3.5 years?
We shot the first footage, that first interview that we did with you was the fall of 2012. So then we shot you at the supermarket in 2013. Then we put the trailer together. Then we got the money and did most of the shooting in 2014.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a wonderful dream thing. You know what my favorite part is? I know it's schmaltzy. I was in my Porsche, which has about 4 miles on it. I never use it. It's too beautiful. I don't like to be in it too much. I put paper down before I sit, like a toilet seat. I put paper on the bottom. I don't want to, you know. And it has a German name for me. I had a German sweetheart years ago, and I understand that Aaron Copland, who is a Westchester, you know, that's Appalachian Spring, and I melt. I'm a Bach and a Handel man and a Mozart man, but Aaron Copland's work and the hair blowing in that, riding in that sports car, I get chills watching that for a second because music and reading and you know, the lovelier, more delicate things in life maybe are more a part of my life than I even think, but I don't prefer to read the Times or books on the iPad. I have to sometimes if I'm out of town, but I like the feel of a book and the heft of it, and I like the sound of really wonderful, wonderful music. And that is an emotional moment for me in the movie, and I had to say it too, chills.
I just had to get the mic back there for a minute. I love that Aaron Copland moment. I too get goosebumps in Appalachian Spring. And I do want to say that I remember seeing Rodney Dangerfield at Dangerfield's when I was 15, and he looked at me as I was drinking my gin and tonic, and he said, "When are you due back in Boys Town?" I'll never forget that. He was amazing.
No, what he really said was, I'll tell you, when do you do back in Boys Town?
Yeah. What do you do back in Boys Town? That was what it was. Okay. I'd like to open it up now to the audience. And here we have a first question right up close.
Mr. Klein, how do you feel when you see yourself as a 20-year-old, 30-year-old? And quite frankly, how do you feel? Do you think you've changed over the years?
No, not at all. I'm just the same as I was. You know what? I used to have a talk show on USA Network. That was a little piece of my mother playing the piano on it when USA was trying to find out what it was, 1985, 86. And I had Lauren Bacall on, and she talked about what a strange thing it is that most people remember her as a beautiful 19-year-old model, and here she was in her 50s, and damn it, she had a life. And boy, she did. She lived her life and was an activist and enjoyed it and didn't have to rely. It is very strange. This all the more because of all the praise heaped on me and all that. But I've seen myself for years in movies. You know, The Owl and the Pussycat. By the way, there's a little tidbit I should tell you about The Owl and the Pussycat. You see the silent blonde woman in bed with me? She became Marilyn Chambers, the porn star. Wow. She was a high school kid from Darien, some wealthy community up here. And her name was Marilyn Briggs. And we were in bed all day together. She had no lines. We were wearing kind of underwearish thing. There was nothing sexy about it. And she said, "Oh, my father's going to kill me when he sees this." And I said, "Why?" She said, "Oh, he's very strict." Wah, wah, wah. It wasn't until 6 years later, I'm talking to Buck Henry, and he said, "Don't you realize who you were in bed with?" I said, "No, she was a high school kid." Marilyn Chambers. It is wild to see myself in sideburns and no brown spots on my skin and all that, but I'm not sure. You know, I remember a lot of anxiety, too. Little COPD, don't worry. You know, I relive a lot of stuff, including there isn't one movie I've ever done where I look at something and I remember the shot I remember having to take it 12 times, or when I was cold or hungry or in pain or something. So it is rather strange. It's never normal, at least in my case, to see myself through the years getting older.
Okay, here we go.
Good evening. Thank you for sharing your life with us in this way. You referenced in the film, together you and Marshall referenced in the film, what does being Jewish mean, or what is Jews in comedy? And you have in your voice, in your delivery, a very Jewish, if you will, cadence to it that I think probably descends from a more Jewish accent of the generation that preceded you. Is that going away? And what does that mean for comedy, do you think?
Well, I'll tell you the truth. I don't feel that I'm particularly Jewish in the more Israeli. I had a knish last week, but other than that, I go to mass, hold it every Sunday. I never miss caking the wafer. You know what? It's rhythms. It's rhythm. The Three Stooges are pure immigrant Jewish rhythms. The Ritz Brothers, Milton Berle, Eddie Cantor, American movies. As I said in the movie, we're overrepresented in comedy Jews and underrepresented in the priesthood. But the truth is, and then it covers a great joke where I say, I believe in one woman, Wonder Woman. One God, Wonder Woman. You know what? They're rhythms. And my parents were born in New York, in Yorkville. My grandparents, as I said, were born in Hungary. There's no doubt. It's all cultures have comedy, have humor. But I would say there is a correlation between oppression, pressure, and comedy. Irish. I went to Ireland twice. I couldn't believe it, how incredibly hip it was. You know, I thought of Irish kids I got into arguments with in the Fordham Road in the Bronx. Yeah. Ireland, that tiny island, has produced so many writers. The sense of humor, you know, American slaves, concentration camp humor. I think Jews are more oriented towards humor than many other cultures. And, you know, just like black basketball players, you know, you see other people going into it, you go into it, that may be an explanation. But it's an important contribution. I think the whole movie industry is kind of intertwined with those Jewish immigrant rhythms, ideas of entertaining. It's just part of the culture, more than some other cultures.
Robert, I had a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I laughed as hard tonight as I did when I first saw you 40-some-odd years ago. But I was wondering if you're going to be doing any stand-up anytime soon in and around the tri-state area?
Let's see, not too long ago, I was at the Tarrytown Music Hall, beautiful old house. I'm going to be in Nevada in about 10 days with Rita Rudner, wonderful team we make. She's terrific. Yeah, I come around. You know, at the moment, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. My schedule isn't like it used to be, but I do 40 personal appearances a year. And, you know, I do a movie. My television show I was on, Mysteries of Laura, has been canceled. That's part of the business. Anyone here see it? Yeah, well, wasn't enough. 5 million, 5.5 million viewers a week wasn't enough for them, so. But I'm still, you know, I'm working, although I love my time off with my bird feeders and my music and my watching documentaries about World War II. We win every time. I love it. I just love it. I hate those Nazis. Give it to them.
Hi. I saw you in concert at Hunter College about 6 years ago with Joan Rivers. It was an enjoyable evening. Have you performed with other comedians in a similar situation like that over the years?
Joan was about the biggest name I ever split the bill with, if you don't count Pat Cooper, who was very funny and close to his retirement. He can't hear, for one thing. But Joan and I know her for 45 years almost. We had the same manager, Jack Rollins. I learned the tape recorded technique from her at the Improv years ago. She was with her husband, Rosenberg. Edgar was a nice man. Had committed suicide, and then she made a TV movie about it and played herself, which was not great. But we did a movie together, a terrible movie, but we were hilarious together. It was called Goosed. And we actually made love. I made love to Joan Rivers. Unbelievable. It was a very complex scene. For the orgasm, we brought in a stuntman from California. The rigging took 2 days of shooting time. But talk about brilliance and multitasking. While we were making love, she sold me 4 bracelets. It's unbelievable. 2 Diamonique and 2 that green stuff from New Mexico. And it was 3 easy payments of $19.95. What is it? The Emeraldos. Yes, they were all synthetic. She was a great. She was mean to some people. Like Elizabeth Taylor was helpless in her claws. She was one of a kind, Joan. One of a kind. I mean, she was at 81. She was still getting out there, but she could be mean, and that red carpet stuff. It's just not my kind of show business, insulting people's outfits and all that. But I know her forever, so it was a shock, and she was to die when you're 81 and sizzling in show business and never know what hit you. I'll take that.
Okay, there we have. Okay, there you are. Yeah.
Hi, I just wanted to tell you that the Child of the 50s album changed my life. It was one of the funniest albums, and when I got it, I wore it out. I played it for all my friends. There's one bit on there that I thought was just brilliant, the Little Rascals routine. And I just wanted to ask you, I know you did the Mike Douglas show, and Spanky and Darla were on the show. Can you just tell me what kind of feedback you got from them?
Well, they both died in their 50s. It's pathetic. Spanky did federal hard time for stock fraud. Darla looked, she didn't look like the little 8-year-old girl. And Mike Douglas was also a little, he was stooping a girl in the office and paying her an extra $80 a week, but that's neither here nor there. You know what? I'm proud of that bit, the Our Gang bit, because what I did was identify that kind of passive racism many years ago. Hal Roach is to be commended in certain ways because the black children on the Our Gang comedy were almost like equals in a completely segregated and, white-dominated world. On the other hand, there was this, let's pretend we have measles, and they put black spots on their face through a strainer, and the kid Stymie puts white spots to the strainer. But you know what? I was watching the other day a Jack Benny film from 1930, and they used the word chink for a Chinese laundry, and all my favorites, Laurel and Hardy, The Stooges, even all of them, they used black joke for a joke. They're looking for their daughter, and it turns around, it's a black face. How things have changed so much. But, Hal Roach had the rights to 3 or 4 songs, and they appear in everything that Hal Roach ever did. Officer Joe Bolton was on Channel 11 introducing this. And, it wasn't David Duke kind of racism. It was institutional, they didn't know any better kind of stupid racism, which is still inexcusable. But I pointed this out years ago. I'm proud of I don't care what Native Americans say, Redskins is offensive. And I did that bit 25 years ago. So, I always sort of I did a huge amount on Watergate on one of my albums. I always wanted to somehow probe and make you think and all that. But it had to be funny, too. Otherwise, I didn't want to talk to myself.
Okay. Do you have the mic?
Mr. Klein, thank you for that film. I thought it was great. I'm a young
I didn't make it. He did.
All right, well, you were in it, so it wouldn't have made any difference.
I was in it.
You
I'm
were
getting
in
a
it.
little,
You
I'm
were
old.
in it.
All
There's
right.
a question here.
Quick question. How do you come up with material so consistently?
Improvisation. Second City was everything to me. 65, 66, Fred Willard and I reported for work. I said it's going to be 50 years. Well, it was last March, 50 years we reported for work. I already was a guy who could make up things. My father was like that. We're listening at the end of radio. We're listening to Jack Benny on a Sunday night. He's already on television too. I said, Dad, who made that radio? Hyman Schlamulik. He lives in Cleveland. And my father would make up a whole thing and improvise. So the way I do my material, the opposite of George Carlin. George Carlin would sit and write it like a playwright. If I got an idea, I'd write it down. But I improvised things on stage, and the shows were recorded, and I'd listen to what I did. It was like a separate part of me. It was a very schizoid thing. Part of me is saying it, and part of me is thinking it, and the stuff just came out. And that's the truth. It just occurs to me. That's my talent. I didn't question it much. I was worried when I started to take Prozac that it's liable to screw me up. Not only the head, but the schmeckle might cease to operate. I was worried. You got it, you do it. And have I had a dry period? When I was getting divorced, I definitely had a dry period. I went the longest without an HBO show. I just had to go to work and I couldn't create. But most of the time, feeling the way I feel, I could just think of it. It comes out. And that's the way it is. I have no way of knowing why or how the process works. And I don't think any creative person really can explain it.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to have, I know there are a lot of questions, but we're going to cut it short. We're going to do about 5 more minutes, so maybe we can take 2 more questions. Who's got the mic? Anybody?
She doesn't have a mic, but she's really raising her hand like she has the answer. Go ahead, without the mic. Go ahead, shout it out. Stand up.
Just in view of the political.
Here's the mic, here's the mic, here's
of
the
the
mic.
political stage right now.
Thank you. All right.
Are you working on any new material in regard to Donald Trump or?
Excuse me.
Or Hillary?
Either she's a ventriloquist or someone else is talking. Because her lips were saying something different.
Okay.
She was reciting the Gettysburg Address, and this one is asking a question.
Okay. All righty.
What?
All right. First of all, this stems because I too came from the cradle of civilization, not the old Divide Gorge, the Bronx. That's the cradle of civilization, not the old Divide Gorge.
The Bronx, you say?
Yes. I said that's the cradle of civilization, not the old Divide Gorge. That's a myth. It's the Bronx. You know it. I know it. Those that came from it know it. I also went to Alfred, and I now live in Yorkville, so we are connected. Also, I saw all the shows you're in on Broadway, and I always thought of you, interestingly enough, as an actor who did comedy.
There's no question here, right? It's just a
No,
statement.
there is. This is the question. This is the question.
There's a Donald Trump person here. We have to.
No, this is.
Let's beat her up.
This is the
I
question.
think people should be
Mr.
beaten up if
Klein,
they.
Mr. Klein,
What?
Mr. Klein,
I
Yes.
want to know if
one more question.
the class.
Yes.
The class.
What do you have to say about Donald Trump?
Well, it isn't Donald Trump that bothers me. It's the whores who know he's destructive and are going, well, we've got, if we could change him, think of, no, really, it isn't a stretch. He's not Hitler. But that's the way the Nazis, and that's the way the fascists in Italy, and that's the way the fascists in Spain got to power, by people saying it'll never happen. They're moronic, and who cares about them? And then the people you depend on, who have families and accept this man who has said amoral and fascistic and destructive things. So I don't worry about him. I worry about the people that are trying to legitimize him. And, you know, it's America, and the people voted for him. And these people helped create this. All these Republicans are going, what? Well, where did he come from? From you, from years of saying that. Democrat, Republican, for the party, you know, how about America? More important than the party. You know, start caring about, if you hate Hillary, then stay home. There's been a 25-year, you know, campaign with her. She's great in bed, I can tell you that right now. You might not think it, but she's tremendous because there's an intellectual component to the sex, which is unbelievable. And a lot of stories about foreign, you know, people. And at least her husband, I mean, why should she be held responsible? Her husband can't keep his schmeckle in his pants. But at least he was judged in the impeachment by a jury of his peers, adulterers. What do you want her to do? Say, oh, that's okay, you stooped my husband, or wanted to. So she came out and said bad things about these poor women, you know. He's a putz. I mean, he was a good president, but, you know, you know. She's a politician. If she were a man, there wouldn't be any of this. Do I want to have a beer with her? I don't give a shit one way or the other, having a beer with her. That's not who I want for president. I want competence. This is a disgrace. And, you know, they had Cruz, who's a vile, most hated man in the United States government. You had Howdy Doody in Florida there, Rubio. There's a definite resemblance to Howdy Doody if Howdy Doody shaved or needed a shave once every day. The choices were abysmal. You had the much-loved Carly Fiorina. I eat her cereal, Farina, every morning, but that's no excuse. And you had the Carson, the brain surgeon, who they have to, when he closes his eyes every other second, they can only cut when he opens them. He goes, I believe in, cut! Don't cut! I believe that, cut! Don't, I think that he has made the cliche about brain surgery completely irrelevant. The man has the intellectual curiosity of you know, basically an 11-year-old child. So, other than that, I have no opinions.
It gives you hope, doesn't it, folks? Can we say good night and thank you to Marshall Fine and Robert Klein?